With Ash's rematch against Alon being the final battle of the day, Ash and Iris head out from the locker rooms that the Masters 8 are meant to stay at. Almost immediately, the two are met with all of Ash's friends, Ash getting a hug and congratulations from Serena. It turns out the stadium is buzzing about how strong the two champions are. Iris sighs, mentioning how the best she's done currently is tie. Still, for all she knows, tomorrow her opponent could be Ash, and since she beat him the last time they fought, she's sure she could beat him again. Ash argues against this, but before either of the two can continue squabbling any more than that, Cylon gets between them. The group decides to go back to the Pokemon Center for the day, but just before they leave, Ash is pulled aside by a trio whom Alexa and Chloe state are radio hosts from the show Dum 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 Z. It's apparently a very popular show, and even Brock, Cylon, and Professor Cerise are fans of the program. Ash asks what they want, to which they simply state that they wanted to interview him, considering he just beat the 3rd and 6th ranked trainers. Ash looks over to his friends, and they all say to go ahead with it, and they'll meet him back at the Pokemon Center. The interview is pretty standard for the most part. The two simply ask how Ash is feeling after the win, and if he's confident he'll win his next few battles. Of course, Ash admits he's still not sure how he's going to battle Lance, Iris, and Cynthia, but he's going to give it everything he's got regardless, and he's sure he and his Pokemon will be able to work things out. The interview continues for a little bit, and at the end, the trio say they have something they want to give Ash. The Pallet Town trainer's confused at first, before they hand him Thwacky's second stick. He takes it, remembering how Thwacky gave it away to the Rocket Trio when it joined him on his adventure. But why did these three have it? He asks them where they got it, to which the trio say that he should really be able to figure it out himself. He might be a twerp, but after all this time, he should be able to recognize them. As the trio says their goodbyes to Ash and their lovely radio audience, Ash realizes what's going on. Unfortunately, before he can thank them, the three are gone. So, Ash decides to go back to the Pokemon Center and eat. We cut to the top 4 of the Masters 8. They discuss what should be done about Giovanni. With Lance having been the only one to actually fight Giovanni, the group was uncertain. They have little to no information on Mewtwo, so it was becoming more difficult to figure out an actual strategy against it. Not to mention, if Giovanni actually won, who knows what he'd do. Lance makes the suggestion that maybe they shouldn't allow the other 3 to fight Giovanni anymore. All 3 are just kids. They may be strong, but facing Giovanni could only get them hurt. Leon argues this, stating that the 3 have already shown themselves capable. They might be lower ranked and they might be young, but they are strong and can handle themselves. Ash even has that Ash Greninja form alongside Mega Evolution, Z-moves, and Dynamax. Steven starts to agree with Lance, though. While he won't disregard the accomplishments of the 3 trainers, especially after battling each of them, he has to agree they're all still very young. This shouldn't be a battle kids have to deal with. Even if they've faced Team Rocket before, those were just grunts. This was the boss of Team Rocket, with a Pokemon that they could barely comprehend. Leon turns to Cynthia, trying to see if she agrees with him. However, Cynthia simply states that if the Rocket leader is here, then they can assume he's not alone. When they beat Giovanni, they should have people ready to take on the rest of Team Rocket. With that, Leon has no other choice but to go along with them. Should Ash, Iris, or Alon have to face Giovanni at all in the future, they will be required to forfeit. They can only hope they are enough to beat Mewtwo themselves. Steven and Lance take their leave, but Cynthia doesn't. She asks Leon why he has so much faith in Ash. Leon thinks for a moment, before saying that it's due to Ash's determination. Even after losing to him and Giovanni, he still turned around and defeated Steven. Even before that, when he was becoming uncertain of himself, Ash wasn't ready to back down from the challenge at hand. Even when they first met, Ash handled the Gigantamax Dreadnought, and still wanted to battle him. Even though Ash lost their first battle, he still put everything he had into making it here today. Cynthia smiles, stating that Ash sure is something. He probably has the respect of everyone else in the Masters 8, other than Giovanni, of course. Though she figures Leon's respect for Ash is more of a feeling of kinship. The day draws to a close, and as night turns to day, the World Championships prepares for another day of battles. The stadium is quickly filled, and it's only a matter of time before the next matches are revealed. Starting off is Giovanni versus Steven, followed by Ash versus Lance. Then, Alon and Cynthia will battle, before the round ends with Iris versus Leon. They are given time to prepare, however the top 4 trainers walk over to Ash, Iris, and Alon. The 3 are confused at first, but it isn't long before they are filled in on the decision the 4 made. None of them argue at the time, though. Iris is the only one who speaks up, stating that if it comes down to it, then she might not have a choice. Ash and Alon are unsure, though. Ash gives a look to Leon, but the world champion clearly shows that this wasn't what he wanted. Still, they agree to give the 3 time to think on this, and come to terms with their decision. Lance then looks to Ash. The 2 smile, now focusing back on the battle they'll be having. Steven versus Giovanni begins, and much to everyone's surprise, Mewtwo looks very different. Steven begins strong, already using his stall strategy effectively by toxic poisoning Mewtwo, and letting the rest of his team take hits in order to whittle it down. Then once Mega Metagross is on the field, he's able to relentlessly beat down Mewtwo with multiple powerful hits, while also being able to predict and avoid the legend. It looks like Metagross might be the one to take down Mewtwo once and for all, but then Giovanni pulls out a multicolored stone. In a blinding light, Mewtwo Mega evolves, and with a Psy Strike, Steven is defeated. Giovanni doesn't look too happy, though. Then, Ash and Lance step into the battlefield. Lance states that he's happy to have seen a trainer from Kanto make it to the Masters 8. However, with all of Kanto and Johto watching, he can't afford another loss. Ash responds, saying that if he wants to face Leon, then he can't afford another loss either. So the battle begins. They start off with Noivern versus Aerodactyl. The 2 high-flying powerhouses race across the battlefield, soaring as high as they can. Aerodactyl has the lead with Noivern coming from behind, firing off Boom Burst after Boom Burst. Lance calls for Stealth Rock, and Aerodactyl drops the rocks before switching out. Out next on Lance's side is Flygon, who Ash doesn't worry too much about, remembering how he dealt with Raihan's Flygon. However, Flygon easily proves itself much more difficult to beat, as it catches up with Noivern and strikes with a powerful Aerial Ace. The 2 Pokemon begin to clash with Aerial Ace and Acrobatics. However, Lance takes the first win, by striking with a powerful Outrage. Next out is actually Gible, which surprises everyone. Lance even asks why Ash would pick such a tiny dragon to face him, to which Ash says not to underestimate Gible. And sure enough, Gible does put in a lot of work. While Flygon's Outrage attacks are very strong, Gible manages to hang in there. Then once Flygon is confused, Ash and Gible strike with a page out of Alon's book, choosing to fire Draco Meteor into Flygon, rather than firing it up into the air. Then, with a final fire blast, Gible finishes off Flygon. This immediately impresses Lance, as he commends Gible for its power, saying it truly has the heart of a dragon. So for that, he won't underestimate it anymore. Aerodactyl returns to the field, who quickly begins to mess with Gible by using Earthquake, before following up with Rock Blast. Multiple rocks strike Gible. However, after the fourth hit, Gible manages to grab one of the rocks in his jaws, before firing it back at Aerodactyl with Dragon Pulse. Unfortunately, the high-flying fossil is able to avoid the attack. Aerodactyl proceeds to confuse Gible by utilizing strange flight patterns that Ash begins to have difficulty predicting. Knowing that it would be easier to take it down by attacking more of the field, Ash calls for Gible to use Draco Meteor, something that Lance won't allow, so he calls for Earthquake. As Aerodactyl makes the battlefield shake, breaking apart, Gible prepares a Draco Meteor. As the meteor grows, suddenly, Gible begins to glow. As it evolves into Gabite, it fires off the powerful Draco Meteor high into the sky, only for Aerodactyl to fire off a Rock Blast. And combined with the Earthquake, it knocks Gabite out. Ash calls back Gabite, proud that it was able to reach new heights in the end, even if it didn't last long. Even Lance admits that Gabite's draconic spirit truly was formidable. Having such a powerful Draco Meteor is quite impressive. The only question was, where did the Draco Meteor go? It never came back down. Many people are confused, as the attack didn't land at all. It just disappeared high into the air. Don's Piplup quickly covers its head, hoping to not be the one hit by the attack when it comes back. They decide to continue the battle from there, with Ash bringing out Tyranitar. The sandstorm rolls in. However, Aerodactyl isn't bothered by the weather change. It soars around, moving much faster than Tyranitar is able to fire ice beams off at it. Ash decides to even things out, calling for Tyranitar to freeze the battlefield. Tyranitar freezes the field over, before sliding around at high speeds, chasing after the prehistoric Pokemon. Ash is about to call for Stealth Rock as Tyranitar slides. However, Aerodactyl quickly catches Tyranitar with a taunt, making the pseudo unable to use the move. However, in order to use taunt, Aerodactyl had to stop flying, allowing Tyranitar to fire off a powerful Fire Blast that the fossil is unable to counter in time. Aerodactyl falls to the ground, allowing Tyranitar to slide up and attack with a mighty crunch. Lance isn't going to take this lying down though, and as soon as he's given the opportunity, he utilizes Earthquake to break up the ice on the battlefield. Then, Aerodactyl fires off Rock Blasts, making it even more difficult for Tyranitar to have a proper path on the icy battlefield. Tyranitar fires off another Fire Blast, which is able to melt parts of the field as it pushes towards Aerodactyl. The fossil counters, firing off another Rock Blast, which cancels the attack out. Suddenly, something begins to fall down from the sky. Lance looks up, and barely is able to make out the image of the Draco Meteor from before. It falls down towards the battlefield, breaking up in the air and showering the field with the powerful draconic stones. Aerodactyl does its best to avoid the attack, but soon it catches up to it, and Aerodactyl is brought down, allowing Tyranitar to finish things with an Ice Beam. Ash lets out a sigh of relief, before thanking Gabite for launching the Draco Meteor so high. The next out on Lance's side is Kingdra. However, Ash knows that Tyranitar is tired from chasing Aerodactyl. Not wanting to push Tyranitar too hard, he convinces the pseudo to return to its Pokeball for a nice rest, stating he'll bring Tyranitar back out later. Ash then brings out another surprise choice, as Rowlet hits the field. Lance knows better than to underestimate this Pokemon, having seen its battle with Steven the day before. He and Kingdra are ready and raring to go, so he immediately calls for a Hydro Pump. The attack catches a slightly dozing Rowlet off guard, and it just barely manages to avoid the attack. Flying up high into the air, Rowlet fires off a Razor Leaf. The Leafs strike, but Kingdra seems to have been barely affected. Lance then calls for Focus Energy. A powerful aura forms around the Seahorse, before it fires off a much more powerful Dragon Pulse. Rowlet flies loops around the attack for a while, but eventually Kingdra is able to make contact with a critical hit. The Alolan Owl is knocked out of the sky, as the referee commends Lance for his use of this powerful combo. With Focus Energy and Kingdra's Sniper ability, the Kanto Johto champion would be able to hit with extremely powerful attacks. Lance proves this once more by using Surf, which covers the battlefield in a tidal wave. Rowlet is swept up in the waves and struggles to get itself free. Kingdra then begins to close in, readying another Dragon Pulse. However, just before it fires, Rowlet frees itself with Feather Dance, allowing it to counter the attack with a strong Brave Bird. Ash knows that Kingdra's attacks are going to be a problem, though. Fighting like this will only result in his defeat. He needs a strategy. But what? As Ash tries to think, Kingdra fires off a Hydro Pump from its thin snout that blows Rowlet across the battlefield. Then it hits him. The snout was what Ash needs to focus on. Lance calls for Dragon Pulse, but as the power builds, Ash calls for Rowlet to aim a Seed Bomb at the snout. Rowlet's Everstone is launched at high speeds, striking Kingdra's snout just as the Dragon Pulse is about to go off. The Draconic energy explodes inside Kingdra, dislodging the Everstone and allowing Rowlet to reclaim it, before Ash has it fly in to finish with another Brave Bird. Kingdra falls, but is soon replaced by Lance's Charizard entering the battlefield. Ash tells Rowlet that the two of them have got this, and the owl fires off Razor Leaf. However, Lance's Charizard takes the hit, while setting up a sunny day. Lance tells Ash that he isn't the only one who can utilize the weather, before having Charizard use Weather Ball. The ball of weather energy becomes fiery, before almost striking Rowlet in midair. The little owl flies around, however Lance's Charizard easily catches up, using its tail to smack Rowlet down to the ground before firing off a Focus Blast. Rowlet gets back up, only to be hit with another blow from Weather Ball. Ash is left with no other choice, so he calls back Rowlet. The next Pokemon on the battlefield is Swampert, who Lance recognizes from the day before. He admits that Swampert fought well against Alon, however he won't be so easily handled. Charizard then takes flight, going higher up into the air before launching another Weather Ball. Ash counters this quickly, utilizing Liquidation in order to take out the attack. However, Lance's Charizard has already circled around in the air, firing off a Focus Blast. Acting quickly, Ash calls for a Mirror Coat. Swampert's body becomes coated in a reflective surface, and the Focus Blast is sent back at Lance's Charizard with far more power. Not wanting to take the damage, Lance has Charizard take flight once again. Swampert tries a few more liquidations, however Charizard's flight pattern allows it to avoid each attack. Ash tries to come up with a plan. He notices how damaged the battlefield has become due to the many earthquakes. Then an idea comes to mind. Ash calls for Swampert to use Liquidation on some of the broken field nearby. The liquid blade stabbed into the field, before Swampert flings it into the air, the rock breaking against Charizard's body. Charizard recovers quickly, and Lance already makes it clear that they can't waste any more time. Charizard dives downward, getting in low to the ground. Ash calls for Earthquake, tearing up the battlefield more, and yet Charizard is able to easily avoid these. Lance then calls for Charizard to finish this with Overheat. White-hot flames spew from Charizard's mouth, enveloping Swampert. Lance's Charizard doesn't let up either, flying up to gain more of an angle on Swampert as the Overheat cooks the Mudfish. Ash and Swampert try to break free, But in the end, Swampert is defeated. Ash thanks Swampert, though, saying that this terrain will be perfect now. Lance notices this and raises an eyebrow at the statement. With a smile, Ash brings out his Dawn Fan, who immediately lets out a trumpet-like sound from its trunk. Lance figures he shouldn't give Ash the chance to attack, and so he calls for another Weather Ball. Charizard fires the ball, however, Dawn Fan curls up into a ball, taking the hit from Charizard with ease. Ash notes that this move is Defense Curl, and taking hits isn't all that move helps with. With a single command, Dawn Fan begins to spin quickly before it begins to tear up the battlefield by racing around on Ash's side. Each spinning motion on Ash's side manages to find one of the Stealth Rocks, finally taking them out of the picture. Lance calls for Charizard to attack, however Dawn Fan's speed is only increased after the Rapid Spin. Dawn Fan curls up again, before Ash calls for a rollout. With that, Dawn Fan takes off, avoiding any Weather Ball attacks that Charizard sends its way. At first, Lance doesn't seem too worried, as Dawn Fan shouldn't be able to catch the flying Charizard. Then he notices how the battlefield has changed with the earthquakes. His eyes widen, and he tells Charizard to brace itself. With immense speed, Dawn Fan takes up a makeshift ramp made out of the terrain. The elephant Pokemon soars into the air. It reaches Charizard. However, due to bracing for the impact, Lance's Charizard is able to grab onto Dawn Fan, throwing the elephant back to the ground. Lance then calls for another overheat. As Charizard spews flames downward at Dawn Fan, Ash calls for a Rapid Spin. The elephant spins quickly, kicking up the flames and dispersing them around it. Then Dawn Fan follows up with another rollout. With the additional speed from Rapid Spin, Dawn Fan's rollout manages to connect this time, knocking Charizard out of the air. When Charizard hits the ground, Dawn Fan strikes again with another powerful rollout attack. Charizard moves more quickly, managing to get Dawn Fan off of it. Lance calls for a Focus Blast, as Ash tells Dawn Fan to keep using rollout. Charizard fires off the Focus Blast, however Dawn Fan is too quick, so the final rollout is able to take Charizard down. Lance chooses to send out Gyarados next. As the red atrocious Pokemon hits the battlefield, it sparkles magnificently before letting out a powerful roar. Ash calls for Dawn Fan to charge in with another rollout. However, Lance immediately counters this with a Dragon Dance, followed by a hard-hitting Power Whip. Gyarados then rushes in, attacking Dawn Fan in a flurry of Ice Fangs, similar to how he attacked Leon's Charizard in the finals of the previous season. Dawn Fan hangs in there, but Ash fears that this might not be able to fight for much longer, so he calls Dawn Fan back to get some rest. Rowlet then takes center stage, as it almost immediately is terrified as Gyarados rushes in with another Ice Fang. Rowlet flies around, with Ash calling for Razor Leaf to slow Gyarados down. However, the Dragon Dance boost is making it much more difficult for Rowlet to get away. Gyarados gets in closer, with a powerful Waterfall, and closes its jaws around Rowlet with an Ice Fang. Or at least that's what Lance first thinks. However, a Seed Bomb from above makes the Kanto Johto champion realize that Gyarados chomped down on nothing more than dispelled feathers. Ash calls for Rowlet, asking if it's ready. Rowlet nods, so Ash pulls out his Z-Ring. Switching from the Firium Z Crystal, he places the Grassium Z instead. Then, he and Rowlet perform the proper ritual, in order for Rowlet to release a powerful Bloom Doom. Flowers engulf the battlefield, as rapidly growing light green energy envelops Rowlet, before exploding outward and enveloping Lance's Gyarados. The move subsides, and Rowlet looks to be clearly exhausted. However, Lance asks if Ash really thought that would be all it would take to defeat him and Gyarados. Without warning, Gyarados comes flying in, finishing Rowlet with an Ice Fang. Lance commends Ash for the powerful Z move, but it'll take more than that to defeat the Red Gyarados of the Lake of Rage. Ash is down to 2 Pokemon, both with a disadvantage against Lance. However, that doesn't push Ash into a corner at all. He smiles, selecting his next Pokemon. With the pop of the ball, Donphan returns to the battlefield. The battle turns into an all-out brawl at high speeds, with Gyarados and Donphan racing across the battlefield. Gyarados attempts to attack Donphan, and he gets in plenty of good hits. However, Ash has Donphan roll around quickly, while also using Earthquake to change the terrain easily, in order to strike easier with rollout. Donphan is also able to defend itself with Defense Curl, taking multiple super effective hits and keep rolling. However, in the end, both knock each other out. The two are down to their last Pokemon, but Ash is disadvantaged by the damage that his last Pokemon has already taken. He takes out the ball, and tells Tyranitar that he's leaving it up to him. With that, the 2 pseudo-legendary Pokemon hit the battlefield. Dragonite roars at Tyranitar, so he responds in kind. Then the 2 run and clash head-on. When they rear back, Lance calls for Ice Punch. Meanwhile, Ash calls for Crunch. Dragonite throws a punch, but Tyranitar bites down hard. The area around Tyranitar's mouth begins to freeze, so Ash calls for Tyranitar to turn. The turning pulls Dragonite alongside the Johto Pseudo. Lance calls for Dragonite to free itself, so Dragonite uses another Ice Punch to clock the side of Tyranitar's head. Finally, the dragon is free. Ash calls for Fire Blast, but Dragonite dodges with a spinning Dragon Dance. This catches Ash off guard, to which Lance says that he has to hand it to Ash, because his strategies can inspire others to teach an old dragon new tricks. Dragonite roars before an earthquake rips through the battlefield once again. Tyranitar begins to lose its balance before Dragonite comes flying in with another Ice Punch. Tyranitar doesn't take the punch well, but it then fires off a powerful Ice Beam that begins to freeze over Dragonite. Lance groans before pulling out a Pokeball. He calls back Dragonite, Dynamaxing the dragon. The giant Dragonite lets out a roar before a hailstorm comes crashing down around Tyranitar. Tyranitar attempts to fight back against these attacks, but Lance calls for Dragonite to keep them coming and to bury Tyranitar. Attack after attack keeps coming after Tyranitar, but the pseudo-legend won't give up. Even with the damage taken, Tyranitar keeps fighting back against Dragonite's relentless assault. As a final chunk of ice comes down, Ash calls for Fire Blast, and Tyranitar releases the most powerful flames that it can. The 2 attacks clash, but it seems like the Fire Blast is overcome by the Max Hailstorm. As flames shoot from where Tyranitar stands, the large chunk of ice falls on top of Tyranitar. Lance stares across the battlefield, waiting for the call of his victory. Just as the referee is about to call the battle in Lance's favor, Ash shouts out to the Kanto Johto champion, saying that Dragonite's Max Hailstorm was strong, but it'll take more than that to defeat him and Tyranitar. Lance begins grinning from ear to ear, before he lets out a roar, challenging Ash to come face him and end this battle. The 2 pseudos then race in once more. They clash, matching each other blow for blow, equally relentless in their primal fight for superiority. The fight becomes less of a one-on-one between 2 competitive fighters and more of 2 monsters fighting on instinct. They clash again and again, putting everything they have into achieving victory, while their battle turns the battlefield into a mess of rubble and torn up grass. In the end, the fighting slows, both on their last legs. Lance throws out the command for Dragonite to use Roost, but then both pseudo-legendaries collapse. Ash and Lance both look to the referee to make a call. However, the referee is unsure. Surprisingly, He calls for the last seconds of the battle to be placed under review. This brings murmurs around the stadium. Who won the battle? Ash or Lance? Some of Ash's friends get nervous, worried that Ash would have lost, while others are certain he was the winner. Minutes drag by, before the referee finally makes the call. He exclaims that by mere seconds, Tyranitar fell after Dragonite. While both did fall in the end, due to the time in between, the battle is ruled in favor of Ash. The crowd erupts in cheers. Ash stands there a little shocked, unable to believe the fact he actually managed to beat his home region's champion. On the other side of the battlefield, Lance's head droops down. He clenches his fists tightly in an act of suppressed rage. Ash notices this, but before he can say anything, or move from where he's standing, Lance looks up to the sky and lets out a roar that would give any dragon on his team a run for its money. The crowd falls silent. However, Lance's roar turns into laughter. The stadium's collective concern turns into confusion before Ash and Lance both make their way across the battlefield to meet each other. Once in the center of the battlefield, Ash asks if Lance is alright, to which Lance exclaims that this was the best battle he has ever had in quite a while. The pure power that he and Tyranitar showed was unlike anything he had ever had to face before. Lance still can't believe his dragons lost to Ash. Ash looks surprised, but Lance tells the 10-year-old to look around them. Not even he and Leon had battled at this result. Ash looks at the battlefield. It had been damaged in the past, but only now Ash is able to realize just how much destruction the two had caused. Ash awkwardly chuckles before stating that he and his Pokemon might have gotten a little carried away. Lance takes Ash's arm, raising it up with his in a sign of victory. Lance then tells the stadium to give it up for Ash, the true, strongest trainer in Kanto. The crowd erupts in applause once again. Back in the locker rooms, the Masters 8 sees this announcement, and all give their own applause. Except Giovanni, of course, who leaves the room. As they all clap in recognition of Ash, Cynthia tells Leon that his faith was well placed. Leon's caught off guard by the abrupt statement. Cynthia glances at him, before saying that she can only remember a few times where Lance actually stated someone was better than him. Ash and Lance exit the battlefield. There's a long intermission in order to get the battlefield repaired, so the battles can continue for the day. The Masters 8 are given free range to go wherever they want, so Ash decides to go see his friends and family. He walks through Wyndon Stadium. However, he ends up running into Chairman Rose. The chairman comes up to Ash, telling him how good a job he did in that last battle. Ash thanks them, before apologizing for the damage done to the battlefield. However, Rose says that it's quite alright, as the revenue made from tickets and streaming for the day will be more than enough to cover the damages. The chairman then brings up his previous offer to Ash, and how it's still on the table. As Ash tries to decline once again, he notices a familiar face walking through the crowd, with large things of cotton candy in hand. Ash calls out the name Peony, and this makes Rose's entire demeanor shift. Peony seems to hear Ash and heads in the direction of his voice, but by the time he realizes who the 10-year-old is with, it's already too late. The tension between the two is clearly apparent, no matter how much they both try and hide it. Rose says that he's surprised Peony would even return to Wyndon, to which Peony fumbles with the reasoning that he couldn't afford to miss seeing the Masters 8 battle in person. Ash is surprised they know each other, To which Rose cuts off Peony before he can explain, and states that Peony was a former gym leader and even champion of Galar. He even faced the likes of Mustard in battle once. Ash is surprised by the revelation, to which Peony has to quickly explain that he's not even a battler anymore. Rose nods, saying that Peony got a reputation for running away from things, something that Peony glares at him for, stating that it's a bit more complicated than that. Before Peony can explain anything else, Rose looks away, seeing one of the many television screens showing the battlefield. The many workers are clearly working hard, but Rose still scowls at it. He turns to Ash and Peony, telling them to excuse him, as there are more important matters for him to attend to. He stares at Peony for a moment, before walking off, pressing on an earpiece he has. Peony makes the point that he's surprised Rose isn't having his secretary take care of things for him. He usually never does anything without her at his beck and call. After he calms down a little, Peony and Ash then both walk together to the stands. We cut to the battlefield, where the Macrocosmos employees are hard at work for their repairs. A man stops, answering a call quickly. Once he gets off the phone, he barks orders to the others, saying the boss has called for them to pick up the pace or else. The workers all begin to work at double the rate, no questions asked. They work to break away the debris, and use Pokemon to fix the dirt and regrow the grassy field. What they don't realize is that a Pokemon has snuck its way onto the battlefield. As they're all too focused on their jobs, a Galarian Farfetch'd begins to test itself by breaking away the debris as well. It breaks the rubble with ease using its leak. However, after destroying a certain patch of debris, it finds reddish-purple light coming from cracks in the ground beneath. Curious, Farfetch'd slams its leak down, breaking more of the battlefield. The light beneath shoots out, enveloping Farfetch'd. This gets the attention of the Macrocosmos workers. But it's already too late. Some call out their own Pokemon, intending to combat the now Dynamaxed Pokemon, but all their steel types are no match. Back with Ash and Peony, the two have made it out to the stands, only to see the Galarian Farfetch'd towering over the battlefield. Immediately, the two split off, Ash running towards the battlefield, while Peony says that he's going to make sure Peonia is okay. Ash gets to the battlefield, and it doesn't take him long to recognize the Farfetch'd as the one he fought before. He calls out to Farfetch'd, but the fighting bird is already confused and angered due to Macrocosmos' agents, so it immediately attacks the 10-year-old. Not having had time to swap out his Pokemon, Ash only has a few options, so he sends out a very tired Noivern. He apologizes and asks Noivern if he's willing to battle. Noivern nods, and so the two begin. Meanwhile, Peony manages to find Peona, and immediately asks if she's alright, handing the cotton candy over to her. Peonia says that of course she is, since the stadium's battle barriers are still in play. She also says that more importantly, he should have gone to help Ash. Peony shakes his head, saying Ash will be fine. He beat Lance after all. Peonia protests this, but Peony sticks close to her, saying he's not leaving her. Ash and Noivern are able to do a lot, but with Noivern's exhaustion, it's still not enough to win. A Max Knuckle knocks Noivern to the ground, but just before Farfetch'd strikes again, the top 3 trainers come to Ash's side. With the combined power of Charizard, Garchomp, and Metagross, Galarian Farfetch'd is swiftly defeated, causing it to revert back to normal size. Steven tells Ash that battling Farfetch'd was very reckless, as he hasn't had time to heal his Pokemon. Ash says he knows, but he wasn't going to ignore a friend in trouble. The big 3 look at Farfetch'd. And then it clicks. Chairman Rose comes into the battlefield, asking what's going on here, and who let this wild Pokemon onto the field. Thinking quickly, Ash takes responsibility, claiming that Farfetch'd isn't a wild Pokemon, and it's one of his. He figured Farfetch'd would want to watch the battles, but he figures it must have gotten too excited and wandered onto the battlefield. Chairman Rose raises an eyebrow at this, unsure of whether he should believe the 10-year-old. Seeing Ash's look of sincerity, as well as the looks of the top 3 trainers, Chairman Rose sighs, telling Ash to make sure someone keeps an eye on Farfetch'd then, before he turns to his employees, and states that whoever was in charge of the repairs is now fired, as it's their fault for not being cautious in the case of anything wandering onto the field in the first place. After that, it's back to work. The work goes quickly and smoothly from there, and soon the battles are able to continue. Alon versus Cynthia goes quickly, as despite Alon's own immense power and strategy, Cynthia is able to turn the entire battle on its head and defeat the Golosian trainer. The final battle of the day is Iris versus Leon, which goes similarly, with Leon coming out of it as the victor. Before the two leave, though, Leon tells Iris that her Pokemon are really strong, and the Unova region should be proud to have someone like her as their champion. The next round is announced. Giovanni versus Cynthia, Leon versus Alon, Iris versus Ash, and finally, Lance versus Steven. Ash and Iris look at each other, and Iris says that she hopes Ash is ready, because she's going to hit him with all the force a future Dragon Master has to offer. Ash smirks, before retorting that he's gotten stronger since last time, so she shouldn't expect the same result. Before Ash gets fully prepared, he takes Farfetch'd over to where his friends and family are. Ash leaves Farfetch'd in the care of his mother, saying that she treated Incineroar well as Litten, so she could probably handle the wild duck Pokemon. And then, he leaves to call up Samson Oak. He switches out his Pokemon, picking a few who had faced Iris in the past. The Alolan Oak asks Ash if he's sure he's making the right decision, to which Ash nods, saying that Pokemon like Dragonite and Charizard had faced Iris before. If any of his Pokemon were the right ones to pick, it would be the ones that knew her best. Still, he does select one Pokemon that he knows she's never dealt with before. Ash is left with one last choice, and at first he thinks he should take Tyranitar again. But he knows that Tyranitar is too far in exhaustion after battling Lance. Then Samson Oak tells the Alolan champion that there's actually a Pokemon here who's been looking forward to this battle. The battles begin after. Giovanni versus Cynthia is a brutal match, as Cynthia chooses to start off with Garchomp. Garchomp Mega Evolves and proves to be a powerful opponent for the armored Mewtwo. Cynthia keeps pushing against Giovanni, so the Kanto trainer has no other choice but to Mega Evolve Mewtwo. The power is enough to push against Garchomp. The two go back and forth for a while, but then Giovanni calls Mewtwo back. Afterwards, he forfeits the match. Once again, everyone is confused by why Giovanni would do this. Some even call out that Giovanni must have thought he met his match with Cynthia. However, Giovanni can overhear some of this, and only smiles in response, as if he knows better. Like clockwork, Garchomp falls onto one knee, as it reverts from its Mega Evolved state. Next up is Leon versus Alon, and both are very heavy-hitting fighters. Leon is quite impressed by the precision of Alon's attacks, as he's able to deal hits with pinpoint accuracy. Unfortunately, While Alon puts up a good fight, the battle ends similarly to Canon, as Alon just can't get past Charizard. Then, it's time for Ash and Iris to battle. Before walking out, Ash pulls out a Pokeball. He smiles, and tells the Pokemon inside that it's time for them to settle this rivalry. He then steps out onto the pitch. Ash and Iris step out at the same time. The crowd cheers for both of them as they take their places on the opposite sides of the battlefield. The two share sentiments over their time together, going from companions on the same path in Unova to rivals on the world stage. Then, the battle begins. The battle starts off with Glalie and Excadrill. Iris immediately tries to have Excadrill use Drill Run on the ground. Excadrill uses Drill Run to burrow underground. However, when it resurfaces, Glalie easily dodges before using Taunt. With that, Excadrill's capabilities are cut in half. Iris then calls for Iron Head, but Glalie prevents Excadrill from landing the hit with a powerful Frost Breath. Iris chooses to switch out after that, bringing Garchomp onto the battlefield. Garchomp starts off with a Swords Dance, before taking flight. Ash takes this opportunity to set up for later, having Glalie set some layers of spikes on Iris' side of the field. Iris tries to destroy them quickly with Scale Shot, but Ash counters with a powerful Freeze Dry. Garchomp goes for Stone Edge next, making several spiky stone pillars erupt from the ground. However, Ash has Glalie bounce between them with a spinning motion, before striking with a point-blank Frost Breath. Garchomp brings up both arms to guard, but when Iris realizes he won't be able to guard for long, she has Garchomp grab Glalie through the attack, force it to the ground, and strike with Stone Edge. The attack strikes critically, and Glalie is taken out of the battle. Still, it's not in vain, as Iris' Garchomp is clearly badly damaged. Ash brings out Galarian Darmanitan next. The Yeti taunts Garchomp, goading it to stay in the fight. Iris asks if Garchomp is sure he wants to stay, and the Landshark nods before soaring into battle. It flies in before striking the ground with the Stone Edge. Galarian Darmanitan doesn't flinch at this, however, breaking through with an Ice Punch before striking Garchomp with a Flare Blitz. The Mach Pokemon breaks away, firing a Scale Shot. However, Darmanitan breaks through with a few Ice Punches, then gets in close to finish off Garchomp. Iris sighs, calling them back. Lapras comes out next, but Ash doesn't mind. He immediately calls for Belly Drum, which maxes out Galarian Darmanitan's attack. Darmanitan then charges in for a Flare Blitz. Despite the power of the attack, Lapras remains strong against the threat, using Freeze Dry once the flames dissipate. Darmanitan becomes more relentless in fighting, however, going for back-to-back Ice Punches. Lapras does her best to hang in there, taking the hits well. However, Ash then chooses to call for Reversal. This makes Iris realize she needs to strike now, calling for Horn Drill. Both attacks land against each other. Darmanitan flares up into Zen mode just as he hits his attack. However, when all is said and done, Darmanitan is the one to fall in the end. It isn't in vain, though, and he knows the perfect Pokemon to take on Lapras. While he knows she is weak to the Ice type, Ash still chooses to send in Dragonite. Upon seeing her, Iris' eyes light up as she exclaims how Dragonite seems different compared to the last time she saw her. Ash smiles, saying that he and Dragonite have been working hard to improve since their last fight. So with that, the clash begins. Immediately, Dragonite proves herself to be far better from the previous time she fought Lapras. While she isn't able to use Waterfall in order to attack, it comes in handy defensively, and as a way to move around. Meanwhile, Iris takes a page out of Ash's book, freezing the battlefield so Lapras has better mobility, The two race around the battlefield, Lapras trying to keep Dragonite away so it can attack her from afar. In the end, Iris resorts to using Sheer Cold. But something strange happens. Sheer Cold doesn't make a mark on Dragonite at all. Then, she returns Lapras to fight another time. Goodra is brought out next, and immediately stops Dragonite in her tracks with a powerful Thunderbolt. Dragonite crashes to the ground, but recovers not long after. She then uses her spinning waterfall strategy, combining it with Dragon Dance in order to blitz through and strike the new pseudo-legend on Iris' side of the field. The water then disperses, and with glowing red eyes, Dragonite strikes with outrage. She strikes over and over until confusion sets in. Then, Ash calls Dragonite back. The crowd begins to wonder why Ash called Dragonite back, and who he's going to bring in to replace her. But much to everyone's surprise, the Pokemon to get on the battlefield next is Dragonite once again. May, Max, and Brock each remember Ash utilizing this strategy before. Meanwhile, those around begin to wonder why no one's tried that sort of thing before. Iris giggles a little, before saying that Ash is as clever as ever, but it still won't help him beat her. She's witnessed this type of battle style firsthand, after all. She then calls for Draco Meteor. Goodra launches the meteors into the sky, where they break away and begin to fill the battlefield. Dragonite takes charge though, flying around as fast as she can, before making it in close enough to strike with dual Wing Beat. However, these two attacks don't do nearly as much as Dragonite was doing before. Iris smiles, mentioning how calling Dragonite back might have had some unintentional side effects, before calling for a point-blank Fire Blast. The flames envelop Dragonite, and when they dissipate, the dragon is left with a nasty burn. Her attack power being even lower than before, Ash chooses to truly return her in her Pokeball, choosing to bring out Crocodile instead. The Desert Croc grins, some of the setting sun gleaming off his red-rimmed sunglasses. Before Goodra can strike with a Sludge Bomb, Crocodile digs underground. It quickly resurfaces behind Goodra, striking with a powerful Dragon Claw, which knocks the dragon off balance. With a powerful Stone Edge right after, Goodra is taken out of the battle. The Desert Croc crosses his arms, before glancing back smugly at Iris. Iris smirks, mentioning how she could give her Dragonite a rematch here, but there's someone else on her team that she feels is more fitting for the fight. With that, Excadrill is brought onto the battlefield once again. Her first Pokemon stares down the Croc, before the two begin to go at it. It's a brutal beatdown between two Unova ground-type Pokemon. Ironhead locking with Dragon Claw, Drill Run tearing through Stone Edge. Excadrill manages to get Toxic off to slow Crocodile down, but the Croc doesn't give in so easily. In the end though, Excadrill goes for a Drill Run. The powerful attack races across the battlefield, dead set on hitting Crocodile. The Croc looks back at Ash, before holding out both arms, catching the spinning mole Pokemon, and allowing Crocodile to hold Excadrill back for as long as he can. But once the spinning stops, Crocodile succumbs to the toxic poison. Ash is now once again on the back foot. He tries to come up with a Pokemon to use. One comes to mind. He pulls out the Pokeball, stating he wasn't planning on bringing him out just yet, but he knows they can win this. Then, with a pop of the ball, Scraggy enters the battlefield. Iris is very happy to see Scraggy, but this reunion doesn't mean she's going to go easy on him. So the battle picks back up, with Excadrill going on for an onslaught of attacks. Scraggy is able to dip and dive in order to avoid, even using the imbalance in its weight to its advantage. Then, once the right moment is found, Scraggy lands a powerful high jump kick before following up with a headbutt. The two then go back and forth for a while, exchanging blow after blow. Scraggy actually starts to impress Iris, as she wasn't expecting the shedding Pokemon to put up this much of a fight. Iris tries to put a timer on things by going for Toxic, but Scraggy manages to avoid the poisonous purple smog before getting in a knockoff attack. Iris counters quickly though, knocking Scraggy away with Iron Head before calling for Drill Run. Ash and Scraggy don't want to give in here, so Ash calls for a risky play and tells Scraggy to use Focus Blast. A blue orb of energy is formed within Scraggy's hands. As Excadrill gets closer, Scraggy stares it down, waiting until just the right moment before launching the attack directly at it. The attack lands, managing to get off enough force to stop Drill Run. Then, before Excadrill can retaliate, Scraggy runs in and knocks the mole out with a headbutt. Iris seems both shocked and impressed after this. As both trainers call back their Pokemon, Iris asks if Ash is sure he wants to switch, to which Ash nods, stating that Scraggy had someone else in mind to fight. The next Pokemon out on the field immediately set the stadium ablaze with their rivalry, as Charizard and Dragonite take center stage with immediate intent to fight till the bitter end. Both Pokemon clash in a way that's so fierce, commentators begin to compare the two to the finals of the previous season. Both Pokemon go toe-to-toe, exchanging blow after blow against each other. Flamethrower attacks collide, before the two hurl themselves at each other in the air. Dragonite goes for Thunder Punch, while Charizard brings out a new move, Breaking Swipe. The two attacks clash, canceling each other out, before Charizard begins to rapidly flap its wings. Multiple green crescent-shaped blades of energy shoot forth, striking Dragonite. The Pseudo-Legend recovers, before firing off an Ice Beam. Charizard soars, attempting to avoid the attack, until the Ice Beam finally ends up clipping Charizard's wing. Charizard falls to the ground, only to be met with a Dragon Rush. The attack lands with explosive force, but when the dust settles, the two are locked in a vicious grappling match, pushing against each other. There's a clear strategy that comes to mind for Ash, so he calls for Charizard to take Dragonite into the air. The two fly upwards, Dragonite trying its hardest to escape the grasp of Charizard, but it's unable to in time. With a finishing Seismic Toss, Charizard claims victory. The next Pokemon out is actually Lapras, who buys some time by managing to freeze the flame Pokemon briefly with Freeze Dry. As Charizard's flames begin to melt the ice from within, Iris calls for rest, before calling back Lapras in favor of her most powerful Pokemon. As soon as Charizard breaks free, he clashes Breaking Swipes with the Axe Jaw Pokemon. The two break away from each other, before Charizard goes for another Hurricane. Beating his wings rapidly, the stadium is filled with a powerful whipping wind. Haxorus doesn't give up so easily, though, digging his claws into the dirt and firing off a Psycho Cut. Ash counters this quickly, though, calling for Charizard to use Hurricane on himself. The powerful winds now focus around a spinning Charizard, becoming more of a tornado which picks up the Psycho Cuts and dispels them around it. But this seems to be what Iris was hoping for, as once the Psycho Cuts are dealt with, Charizard is met with a powerful Giga Impact. Charizard drops from the air, focusing on holding back the powerful attack by pushing against Haxorus' tusks. Unfortunately, when facing up against an attack achieved thanks to the help of Cynthia, after so much damage already, Charizard can't quite overcome the attack. While much of the brunt force of the blow was dispelled by Charizard's attempts, the Giga Impact is still able to do a lot to the Flame Pokemon. Charizard tries to hold on there, and fires off one last Flamethrower, which envelops Haxorus. before falling unconscious. When the flames go away, Haxorus is shown to be badly burned, but still on its feet. Clearly, the Unnovan dragon type is much tougher than people were anticipating. Before Charizard is replaced in battle, Dragonite comes out. She shows her respect for Charizard, before offering to take his place in the battle. This actually shocks Ash and Iris, but Ash allows the gentle giant to take over the fight. Unfortunately for them, Iris decides to call back Haxorus. Instead, the sleeping Lapras takes the field, which makes up for the fact that Dragonite won't be able to get her revenge. With Lapras sleeping, Dragonite is able to set up Dragon Dance, before attacking with dual Wing Beat. The speed and power of Dragonite is made clear after the boost, as the two hits do a lot to Lapras. However, when Lapras wakes, she immediately hits Dragonite with a powerful Freeze Dry, which attempts to completely freeze Dragonite in place. Dragonite manages to get out quickly, but not without maintaining a little frost on her wings. Lapras continues to use Freeze Dry against her, and as she and Ash attempt to find an opening in her defenses, finally, Ash comes up with a strategy, calling for Waterfall while telling Dragonite to move erratically within it. Dragonite zips around within the Waterfall, while Lapras continues trying to use Freeze Dry. Iris calls out a reminder that Waterfall can't damage Lapras due to Water Absorb, but Ash just smiles, saying that's not what he's going for. Dragonite rushes in, heading straight forward towards Lapras. A final Freeze Dry goes out, but Dragonite stops, allowing the water to go ahead of her. The water rushes past, meeting the Freeze Dry and being frozen in place. Then, breaking through the ice, Dragonite flies in before striking Lapras with a few powerful blows of outrage. Lapras takes the hits, but then Dragonite's arm begins to freeze. The ice travels up Dragonite's arm, before Iris calls Lapras back in order to Gigantamax. Immediately, she calls for Max Strike. Dragonite flies away, but something goes wrong, and she is enveloped in the geyser of energy. Ash is in complete shock, while Iris cheers her Lapras on, exclaiming that everything was falling into place. Ash couldn't understand it, though. The extra weight of the ice shouldn't have slowed them down this much. Confusion didn't seem to be a problem either. There had to be some other reason Dragonite couldn't escape in time. That's when he takes note of the frost on Dragonite's wings. That was the problem. The frost was slowing down Dragonite's flight. Dragonite calls back to Ash. He understands quickly, saying that if speed won't handle Lapras, then they'll go with bulk. Which means it's time to get huge. Dragonite Dynamaxes, now becoming a towering opponent on level with Lapras. Lapras uses G-Max Resonance, but the attack ends up doing nothing in face of Dragonite's Max Guard. Ash and Dragonite then fight back, using Max Airstream as Lapras goes for another G-Max Resonance. The attacks clash against each other, canceling each other out. Their secondary effects, however, are still enacted, as Dragonite's speed is boosted, while an Aurora Veil appears on Iris' side of the battlefield. Iris is about to call for rest, but Ash doesn't give her the chance, as he calls for a full power Max Wyrmwind. With a determined roar from Dragonite, winds of draconic energy envelop Lapras. Despite the Aurora Veil, it does significant damage, and shows Iris that she's going to have to go full force. As Dragonite reverts to normal, the two know they have to put everything into this attack. Ash commands Dragonite to rush in. Iris goes for Freeze Dry, but Dragonite barely avoids it with a Dragon Dance, before grabbing Lapras. Ash yells for outrage, and with all her anger and might, the gentle giant lifts Lapras before suplexing her. When Dragonite lets go of Lapras, the world can see that Lapras has fainted. Dragonite had done it. She lets out a proud roar, before she too falls unconscious, once again making the two trainers tied up. The world cheers for Dragonite's display of spirit, as both trainers return their Pokemon. The two call out for their final Pokemon, Iris sending out her Ace, while Ash sends out a familiar face. Upon seeing his opponent Haxorus, Scraggy gets a little caught off guard. Now seeing his old sparring buddy up close, but he doesn't let that get in the way for too long. Before they begin, Iris jokes how this feels like old times, back when they were training these two together. Ash can't agree more. But now, they aren't just in training. This is the real deal. So he and Scraggy aren't going to hold back. Iris chuckles, before stating she wouldn't have it any other way. The two Pokemon charge against each other, Scraggy stumbling over himself a little as he rushes in. He leaps in with a high jump kick, but is met dead on with a breaking swipe. Still, he uses his other foot to push off, and the two Pokemon clash head on. Despite his hard-headed headbutt, Scraggy loses out in this regard. But he doesn't let up there, choosing to go in and strike with multiple back-to-back knockoff attacks. Haxorus takes these with ease, while also barely flinching when the burn from Charizard inflicts on occasion. Scraggy tries to follow up with a headbutt, but Haxorus grabs Scraggy out of the air, slamming him into the ground before batting him away with a full power outrage. Scraggy gets back up and prepares a Focus Blast. The energy builds as much as Scraggy can get it to, before he fires it off. Iris and Haxorus don't care though, as the Psycho Cut slices the Focus Blast in half, before barreling towards Scraggy. Scraggy gets a little cocky, thinking its immunity to psychic attacks will save it, only for the attack to force Scraggy back into a wall and embed itself as a trap. The energy barricade around the battlefield flashes for a moment, but it seems no major damage has been done to anything. Haxorus comes rushing in, striking with 3 hits of outrage, the final of which knocks Scraggy to the ground, where it's met with a headbutt from Haxorus that serves to break the dragon out of its own confusion once again. However, just before it can attack with a breaking swipe, Scraggy gets itself out of the corner by leaping up with a headbutt, catching Haxorus below the jaw. Haxorus staggers back a bit, allowing Scraggy to use the wall in order to get a higher hitting high jump kick, in order to knock Haxorus off its feet and onto the ground. Scraggy stands tall, but not for long, as Haxorus still manages to get back up and sends Scraggy flying across the battlefield with breaking swipe. Scraggy falls in the center. It attempts to get back into the fight, but Haxorus manages to get over there before it can attack at all. The battle then becomes a relentless beatdown, with Haxorus attacking over and over in order to get Scraggy to fall. No one has ever seen Iris battle with this much ferocity, but Silent is able to point out that the Unova champion knows she doesn't have much time left herself. Haxorus is already being pushed to his limits by using this much force despite exhaustion and the burn. At any moment, Haxorus could collapse, but the two Unovans are staying in this fight against Ash through sheer willpower. Though it's clear to everyone that Iris isn't the only one staying in the fight on will alone. The only question was, who wanted this victory more? Haxorus finishes his relentless assault. Scraggy sways back and forth, putting up both fists like a boxer dazed in the arena. Then, Scraggy falls onto a knee. He restrains himself from completely collapsing, but it's getting difficult for the shedding Pokemon to remain in this fight. He looks up at Haxorus, his old sparring partner, his rival, his friend. Iris calls for Giga Impact, which leaves Scraggy cratered in the ground. Everyone waits in silence for the referee's call. Light begins to come from the crater Haxorus left. The audience watches as slowly Scraggy returns to the battlefield. But the shedding Pokemon is not the same. He's bigger now, with a longer tail. His singular tuft of hair has become more of a mohawk. His demeanor is different too. He moves with a newfound swagger, flipping a hood of his shedded skin over him. This isn't Scraggy anymore, but rather the hoodlum Pokemon, Scrafty. Iris smiles, saying that it looks like Ash has evened the playing field. This battle might take a bit longer than they were thinking. Haxorus gets ready, only for Scrafty to come flying in. He strikes Haxorus in the chest with High Jump Kick, before firing off a point-blank Focus Blast. The Axe-Jaw Pokemon loses ground, but regains it by coming in with a breaking swipe. Scrafty doesn't falter here. Holding his own, he takes the blow before striking with a knockoff. The two then begin to butt heads, clashing over and over with each other as they try to get the other to yield. This time, Scrafty gets the slight upper hand, but Haxorus returns with a powerful outrage. The two hits of the move send Scrafty flying back. The hoodlum Pokemon still recovers, but is now faced with a final call for Giga Impact. Ash and Scrafty look at each other, but neither one is worried. Scrafty gets ready to go. A blue aura envelops him, before he charges at Haxorus with a head smash. Haxorus flies in with Giga Impact, and the two Pokemon collide. Neither wants to give in. Both Pokemon want to prove themselves to the other, right here and now. However, in the end, only one is able to come out on top. The burn inflicts damage, causing Haxorus to wince in pain. That one slip-up gives Scrafty the edge, allowing Head Smash to break through and send Haxorus to the ground. As Scraggy collapses, too, Ash is deemed the winner of the battle. His rivalry with Iris has led him to gain another point in the qualifying rounds, meaning he only has one person standing in his way before he ensures his spot in the semifinals. We cut to Chairman Rose. He's no longer watching the battles take place. In fact, he left a while ago. On his end of a phone call, he asks the person if they're sure. The other person says yes. While Ash and Lance's battle did damage the battlefield, and even the power spot, the levels of energy that came from in were far greater. It even caused a slight power surge in Wyndon. Rose smiles, before asking what the scale would be should they combine their resources, to which he's told that it would be far more significant of a surge, on a region-wide scale. And that's where we're going to leave things right now. So what do you guys think? How do you feel about the battles you've seen today? Are you satisfied with the conclusion to Ash and Iris' rivalry? And what do you think is going on with Project Eternal? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye!